you can go back one slide, please. I would like to talk about work with exception.
So the question is, if you have basically an HR system where you don't have the enough data, or you don't have the data quality of actually what people actually do and what their job really involves, other than just their title, how do you create roles? How do you elevate IT roles into enterprise roles, and how do you manage exceptions? Okay. So what I've seen is, looking at IT roles is something that you really should not take too far to the extremes, right? Obviously, that is the one of the key foundation blocks of bottom-up role design, right? But at some point, you really have to understand what these people are doing, right? And you have to create your own glossary and your own taxonomy of, first of all, what an IT role means in terms of group membership or attribute values, etc., in the user repositories. And secondly, how do you group IT roles into enterprise job roles in a meaningful level of granularity, right? So it's like how many IT roles you put into an enterprise role, and how do you assign these? The exceptions-based process, again, if it's I think these rules of thumb kind of address this, right? So if you are going to have a lot of exceptions, right, that means you're going to see a lot of people, being assigned to roles that have only one or two people in them, right? Bad. So I think the answer to manage exceptions is that you have to obviously do reviews every once in a while, and then kind of look at how many people actually fall into the roles that you design and how many are outside of them. You have to have a way of representing representing these exceptions in a way that you can recertify them, right? And if you see that everyone has the same kinds of exceptions, right, that means that exception is a role in essence, right? The other way that I've seen is people having to have different ways of representing people than just organizational hierarchy, right? So if there's ways in a product to define things like a peer group or a project group or something of a temporal grouping of people or a team, you should use that. That's another way of minimizing exceptions.
Second question, if we have 400 roles, how many managers do we need to have? If we said before that one manager should manage only 6 roles, so do we need one?
So I don't think there's a real good answer to this, right? Because it may be that out of these 400 roles, it's going to be the same 20% of roles being approved by all the managers. So it's really, if I'm a manager in a department that is similar to everybody else, I'm going to have the same exact 6 roles than all these other people, right? If I'm a manager in a department where my people do something completely different from the normalcy in the organization, I'm going to have 6 different roles, right? So there's, I may not have understood your question correctly, but based on, there's no way to kind of say how many managers you want to have.
I just want to know if we need a lot of role engineers.
Oh, role engineers. Okay. So for how many people do work for how many users do you have? 7,000 people and about 400 roles.
Now more than 400.
Okay, but that's your end goal. Yeah, have about 4. I would say it's very much a similar kind of use case. 2 to 3 people, would be ideal. In addition to how many people have responsible for operation of identity and access management systems today? Okay, so anyway, a total team is about 5 to 7 people, right? So you got people who are more like responsible for operations and policy design and governance, and you got some people who are the actual business analysts or role managers, role engineers who are in the liaisons in the middle. Any other questions? We got time for one more question. Should use it. Yeah. So the question is, is it better? Which is the better way to do? IT roles, define them into business roles, or business roles and define them into IT roles, and should I follow the bottom up or top down approach? Is that your question? Okay, good. There's no, most people need to look at the assets environment, right? It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get to any results if you only have a future state and you start from just the business roles and you kind of do a top-down design of here's our level of business roles. We did a lot of business analysis and this is what we came up with. There's existing situations in the company, right, which are usually defined in IT roles. So what this cycle really means, right? Go into this thing and you start mining roles, that's bottom up. Right? So you basically go in with a tool and you start mining the roles going from the bottom and you start working your way up. That's an automated process, right? When you start adjusting the roles, you have these conversations with the managers and line of business people. That's top down. They basically say, hey, here's what we created, but here's these other requirements and other considerations we need to take into account, right? And then certifying the roles again, role engineer thing. That's also part of a top down. So the answer is first you do bottom up, and then you do top down, and you iterate through the cycle. It's a good question. I don't have any quantitative stats, but I can give you some anecdotes. Okay. So I was working for a project for a large manufacturing company, where they wanted to design their huge role structure, identity net management strategy, right? And they gave me a PowerPoint slide deck with 59 slides, and every single slide was full of information, right? Diagrams, flows, here's how things will flow in the future, etc. And I asked the question, it's all beautiful, right? What are you doing right now, right? And the question was, no, that's not what we hired you for, Andras. You need to evaluate this long-term strategy that we're going to do, and you don't have to ask questions about what we do right now. So again, if you understand what you're doing today, and you have a very good picture of the asset situation, and for the most part, in most of the assessments where I go and help people with these kinds of things in reality, it turns out that 80% of companies have no idea how they do these processes, right? So they don't have documentation for it. You have to interview people to ask these questions and get answers to them. You have to document this on your own for them. So if you do your homework and map these out ahead of time, right? And you clearly understand the phasing, right? How step number 3, how you're going to onboard applications and organizations, right? And you can scope it that you can get results every 3 to 6 months. You're not going to fail. If you don't do this, you're 95% guaranteed to fail with this thing. Okay? 95% guaranteed to fail if you don't do scoping and you don't map out assets and future state. Okay? I think my time is up here. If you have any questions, I'm here in the break. Come and ask me anything you'd like, even more difficult questions as well. Okay?